Ladies and gentlemen, silence doesn't always equal disinterest. In fact, one of the biggest misconceptions people have in the early stages of dating is believing that a lack of communication automatically means a lack of feelings. It's easy to think if he liked me, he'd be texting, calling, making plans. But human behavior, especially in romantic dynamics, is rarely that straightforward. Silence can mean many things, and disinterest is just one possibility among several. Often, silence is a sign of internal conflict, uncertainty, or even overwhelming emotion. When a man feels something strong and unexpected, it can disrupt his usual emotional rhythm. For some, emotional intensity is unfamiliar territory. He might be used to controlling situations, appearing confident, or keeping things surface level. But when something or someone comes along and triggers something deeper, it can throw him off balance. That feeling doesn't always translate into bold action. For many men, it translates into retreat. Pulling back becomes a way to manage the feelings they're not sure how to handle. There's also a real fear for some men around vulnerability. Opening up to someone, especially someone they genuinely like, can stir up fears of being hurt or exposed. That fear can paralyze action. He might fear saying the wrong thing, fear being rejected, or fear that his intentions will be misunderstood. So rather than take the risk, he does nothing to someone on the outside, especially to the woman he's pulled back from. It looks like disinterest, but from his side it may actually be self-protection. Then there's timing. A man might genuinely want to move forward, but his life circumstances may not match his emotional desire. He could be dealing with stress, career pressure, unresolved past pain, or personal insecurity. In those moments, silence becomes a temporary shield, an effort to regain control before he re-engages. It's not ideal, and it's not always fair, but it's human. And that humanness gets misinterpreted as indifference when, really, it's often anxiety or emotional overload. It's also important to consider how society has conditioned many men not to talk about their feelings. Emotional communication isn't always a well-practiced skill, so when feelings do arise, instead of expressing them, they shut down. It's not because they don't care, it's because they don't always know how to show that they care in a healthy, open way. Silence becomes their language, even when it's confusing and counterproductive. So while silence can be a red flag, it's not automatically a dismissal of your connection. It might be discomfort, it might be self-doubt, it might even be that he cares more than he knows how to express. And while none of that excuses poor communication, it does mean that silence in itself shouldn't always be taken as the end of the story. There's often more going on beneath the surface than you can see. Understanding that can help you respond with empathy instead of insecurity, and with strength rather than self-blame. Fear of vulnerability can cause emotional retreat in ways that are often subtle but deeply impactful. When someone begins to care, when they start to feel seen or emotionally connected, it can trigger an instinct not to come closer, but to pull away. This retreat isn't about manipulation or emotional games. It's about self-protection. Vulnerability is uncomfortable, especially for people who have learned, through experience or upbringing, that emotional exposure comes with risk. For many men in particular, vulnerability isn't something they were encouraged to embrace. From an early age, they're taught to be strong, composed, and self-reliant. Feelings like sadness, longing, confusion, or emotional neediness are often shamed or minimized. As a result, when those feelings start to surface in adulthood, especially in romantic relationships, they don't feel like a natural part of connection. They feel dangerous. Vulnerability becomes synonymous with weakness, and so the reflex is to retreat, to regain control, and to shut down rather than risk being emotionally exposed. The retreat might look like silence, indecision, mood swings, or even sudden withdrawal after moments of intimacy. Someone may share a meaningful experience with you one day, then act distant or cold the next. It's jarring, but what's happening behind the scenes is often a quiet emotional panic. When someone is faced with the opportunity to be truly seen, to be open, honest, emotionally naked. It can bring old fears to the surface: fear of abandonment, fear of not being good enough, fear of being misunderstood. And when those fears rise, the natural reaction isn't to lean in, it's to lean out. In some cases, vulnerability has been met with pain in the past. Maybe they opened up before and were met with betrayal, mockery, or emotional abandonment. That history doesn't just disappear when they meet someone new. It lingers. It colors their ability to trust. So even if they feel drawn to you, even if part of them wants to go deeper, another part is pulling the brakes. That's not because they don't feel something. It's because what they feel scares them. The fear of repeating past wounds becomes more powerful than the excitement of something real. This kind of emotional retreat can be confusing for the person on the receiving end. It feels personal, it feels like rejection, but more often than not, it's an internal struggle that has very little to do with you. It's about their emotional capacity, their self-image, and the limits of what they believe they can handle. Vulnerability requires a level of emotional maturity and safety that not everyone has cultivated. So instead of stepping into that space, they run from it. Not because you aren't enough, but because vulnerability feels too risky for them right now. That fear creates distance, silence, or inconsistent behavior, not out of malice, but out of deep internal resistance to being emotionally open. And until that fear is addressed, vulnerability will always feel like a threat, not a doorway to connection. Men process emotions differently, and understanding this can shift the way we interpret their actions, or silence, in relationships. While everyone experiences emotion, the way men have been conditioned to handle those feelings is often vastly different from what women are taught. From a young age, many men are socialized to internalize rather than express, to solve rather than sit with emotions, and to compartmentalize rather than communicate. As a result, when they feel something deeply, especially in the realm of romantic relationships, it doesn't always show up in obvious or expected ways. A man might be feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or even falling in love, and yet his outward behavior might seem calm, detached, or even avoidant. This can be confusing, especially for someone who's used to verbal processing or emotional sharing as a way of bonding. While one person might express worry through conversation and vulnerability, another might go quiet, turn inward, or focus on a distraction, like work, hobbies, or solitude, as a way to cope. It's not that he doesn't feel, it's that he doesn't necessarily process in a visible or relational way. This difference isn't always about ability. It's often about comfort and habit. Men aren't necessarily less emotional, but they may be less practiced at articulating what they feel. Emotional fluency isn't just natural, it's learned. And if someone hasn't been encouraged to explore their inner world, it can feel foreign and even frightening to try. Emotions might be felt intensely, but without the language or safe space to express them, those feelings get buried, delayed, or redirected into more acceptable behaviors. That's why frustration might look like anger instead of sadness, or why fear might come across as withdrawal instead of vulnerability. In intimate relationships, this can create friction. One person might feel emotionally disconnected or confused by the silence or lack of expression. They might think he doesn't care, when in reality, he's processing. And because he hasn't learned how to share what's going on inside, he might not even realize the impact of his silence. He may not understand that processing alone, without communication, leaves the other person feeling rejected or uncertain. In his mind, he might be trying to protect the relationship by not reacting too quickly or emotionally. But from the outside, it reads as distance. There's also a tendency for men to look for solutions before feelings. If something feels wrong, many men go into fix-it mode, trying to solve a problem in their head before speaking about it. The emotional aspect may be deeply present, but it's framed as a challenge to be managed rather than an experience to be shared. This doesn't mean a man can't learn emotional connection or communication, but it does mean that we shouldn't assume a lack of words equals a lack of care. He may simply be dealing with emotions in a way that's been ingrained, not intentionally harmful, but not always healthy either. Recognizing that men often have a different emotional roadmap can help make sense of behavior that would otherwise feel like rejection or indifference. Unresolved past hurts can influence present behavior in powerful and often invisible ways. Many people carry emotional wounds from past relationships, experiences of betrayal, rejection, abandonment, or heartbreak that shape how they respond to love in the present. For some, these wounds never fully healed. They were either ignored, buried, or glossed over with the hope that time alone would make them disappear. But emotional pain, when left unaddressed, doesn't vanish. It lingers, quietly shaping choices, reactions, and relationships in ways that may not be immediately obvious. When someone has been hurt before, especially in a deep or formative way, they may approach new connections with caution, even if they're genuinely interested. A person might want closeness but instinctively fear it. They might crave connection but struggle to trust it. This internal push and pull creates emotional friction that often leads to confusing behavior, like being warm and open one moment and distant or aloof the next. It's not because their feelings are fake. It's because their past has conditioned them to associate intimacy with pain or loss. For men in particular, these unresolved emotional wounds can be even more difficult to process. If they've been taught to suppress feelings or view vulnerability as weakness, they may not have the tools to even recognize how much the past is affecting them. A man who is cheated on, dismissed, or emotionally neglected may carry those experiences into new relationships without realizing it. The result? He might flinch when things get serious, question your intentions without reason, or subconsciously sabotage the connection to protect himself from a repeat of the past. Even small triggers, a certain phrase, behavior, or emotional moment, can reopen old wounds. Without knowing it, he might be reacting not to you, but to someone who hurt him years ago. He might interpret your honesty as criticism, your independence as disinterest, or your affection as a setup for disappointment. And yet, from the outside, it looks like he's just pulling away without explanation. But what's really happening is that the past is driving his present decisions, creating fear where there should be excitement, and doubt where there could be trust. These patterns can be hard to break because they operate beneath the surface. A man may not consciously decide to retreat, it just happens. His emotional memory is louder than logic. Even when he feels drawn to you, part of him is on guard, waiting for the moment it all goes wrong. So he distances himself, not because he doesn't care, but because caring too much feels risky. And until those past hurts are acknowledged and worked through, they'll keep interfering with new opportunities for connection. This doesn't mean people are doomed to repeat the past, but it does mean that emotional healing is essential. Otherwise, every new relationship becomes a battlefield for old pain. Unresolved wounds don't just fade with time. They need attention, understanding, and often compassion from both sides to stop controlling the narrative of the present. His behavior reflects his readiness, not your value. It's one of the most important truths to hold on to when dealing with someone who is inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or distant. When someone pulls away, stops communicating, or hesitates to commit, the first instinct for many is to internalize it, to assume it's something they did wrong, something they lacked, or something they could have done better. But that mindset creates unnecessary self-doubt and shame, especially when the truth is much more about where he is emotionally, not who you are as a person. Readiness isn't just about liking someone or being attracted to them. It's about whether someone has the emotional space, maturity, and willingness to build something real. A person can genuinely be drawn to you and still not be ready to show up consistently. He might not have the tools to navigate intimacy. He might still be tied to unresolved emotions from a past relationship. He might feel the pressure of expectations and not know how to meet them. None of that has anything to do with your worth, your beauty, your intelligence, or your ability to love. It's about his capacity, not your capability. It's easy to romanticize a connection, and think that if you were just more patient, more supportive, or more chill, he'd finally step up. But readiness doesn't work like that. You can't fix someone's timing with effort. You can't inspire growth in someone who hasn't decided to grow. A man who is emotionally unready may be drawn to you but still pull away. He may be kind but distant, loving but noncommittal. That duality is confusing, but it doesn't mean you're not enough. It means he's not prepared to meet you where you are. Sometimes we meet people at the wrong time in their lives, not because they're bad or broken, but because they haven't done the work to be fully present in a relationship. And when that happens, their behavior often shows it. They avoid hard conversations. They disappear when things get real. They send mixed signals not to hurt you, but because they're conflicted within themselves. And still, it feels personal. It feels like rejection, but it's really not. One of the most empowering shifts you can make is recognizing that someone else's inconsistency or hesitation is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of where they are in their own emotional journey. That awareness allows you to stop chasing clarity from someone who isn't clear with themselves. It allows you to stop blaming yourself for their silence and instead start asking whether they are capable of the relationship you want. When you separate their readiness from your worth, you stop tying your self-esteem to their behavior. You begin to realize that being loved well requires more than attraction or chemistry. It requires two people who are emotionally ready to show up. And when someone isn't there yet, it's not your job to convince them. It's your job to protect your peace. Your job is to stay anchored in your worth, especially when someone else's behavior makes you question it. It's easy to feel unsteady in situations where someone is hot and cold, when they pull away without explanation, or when their interest fades without closure. In those moments, the natural response is often self-doubt. You wonder what you did wrong, what you could have done differently, or why you weren't enough to keep them engaged. But that spiral only leads you further from yourself, further from the truth of your value, which is something no one else gets to determine or diminish. When someone's attention disappears, it creates a vacuum. And we're wired to want answers. But trying to extract meaning from someone's silence can leave you stuck in a cycle of overthinking. Instead, the more empowering path is to focus inward, not outward. Their confusion doesn't require your compromise. Their inability to show up doesn't call for you to shrink, chase, or prove your worth. You are not responsible for fixing their fear of intimacy, their emotional unreadiness, or their past wounds. You're responsible for staying rooted in your own self-respect, your own clarity, and your own emotional well-being. Anchoring in your worth means not letting someone's inconsistent behavior make you feel like you're not lovable. It means choosing to believe that your value is constant, even when someone else is too unsure, too afraid, or too unavailable to meet you fully. You don't become less valuable because someone doesn't choose you. People only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves, and if someone hasn't done the work to be emotionally available or present, that's about their limitations, not your lack. It also means setting boundaries, not to punish others, but to protect your energy and self-esteem. If someone is sending mixed signals, going quiet, or treating your presence as optional, staying anchored in your worth means you don't stick around hoping they'll change. You don't water yourself down to be more convenient or less intense. You don't make excuses for behavior that leaves you feeling anxious, confused, or unseen. You walk away from what doesn't nourish you, not because you're giving up, but because you know you deserve more. This mindset isn't about ego or arrogance. It's about dignity. It's about understanding that love should never feel like a guessing game. Real connection is mutual, it's consistent. It makes you feel safe, not insecure. So when someone's actions make you question your worth, that's the moment to return to yourself, not to fight for their attention, but to reaffirm your own self-belief. You are not just worthy of love, you are worthy of healthy love. Love that shows up, love that chooses you, love that doesn't make you chase clarity. Staying anchored in your worth means remembering that you are not defined by who stays or who goes, but by how you choose to stand tall in the face of uncertainty.